Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Let's be clear with Australians about what this parliament is being asked to vote on. The Coalition's being asked to vote against an income tax cut, not because we oppose tax relief for working Australians, but because the government has deliberately wrapped modest tax relief inside a new bundle of toxic taxes on businesses, on retirees, on family savings, on renters, on first home buyers, and on young Australians who are trying to get ahead. That's the choice that Labor has engineered. They've taken measures that the Coalition supports and chained them to measures that we fundamentally oppose. They put a tax cut in the same package as taxes that will make it harder to build wealth, harder to invest, to rent, to buy a home and to start and grow a business in this country. Now, that's not good government. That's political blackmail. This bill contains 4 key schedules. Schedule 1 changes the capital gains tax regime. Schedule 2 changes negative gearing. Schedule 3 introduces the Working Australians tax offset. Schedule 4 introduces a $1,000 standard deduction for work-related expenses. The Coalition supports Schedules 3 and 4. We support tax relief for working Australians. We support making tax returns simpler. And we support Australians keeping more of what they earn. But we oppose Schedules 1 and 2 because they represent a direct attack on aspiration, on investment and the Australian dream. What Labor has offered working Australians is a fraction of relief years from now, relief that will arrive after families have already been crushed by inflation, by bracket creep, higher mortgages, higher rents and higher grocery bills. And by the time many Australians actually see the benefit, it will have in fact been eaten away by the very cost of living crisis that this government has helped create. This government expects Australians to be grateful when it hands back a fraction of what it has already taken. The Prime Minister promised Australians again and again that he would not introduce these taxes. He promised there'd be no changes to negative gearing. He promised there'd be no changes to the capital gains tax. And he said all of that before the election because he knew that the Australian people would not vote for it. And now, here we are. This is a budget of broken promises. It's not intergenerational fairness, it's intergenerational fraud. It punishes people who did the right thing, who worked hard, saved carefully, invested modestly and tried to build something for themselves and for their families. It punishes the self-starters of this nation. Deputy Speaker, Margaret Thatcher once put it perfectly when she said of British Labor that they would rather the poor were poorer provided the rich were less rich. She understood that politics of envy does not create prosperity, it does not fund better services, it does not lift people up, it drags people down. What was true of British Labor then is true of what has become of the Australian Labor Party now. Those opposite do not ask how we make more Australians prosperous. They ask how can they punish those who are. They do not ask how to grow the economy, they ask how to carve it up. That is the ideology behind this bill. Let me turn first to negative gearing. Labor's dressing up these changes as though they're designed to help young Australians and first home buyers. That is false. The reality is simple. When you tax housing investment, you get less housing investment. When you make it harder to provide rental homes, you reduce rental supply. And when rental supply falls, rents rise. It's not complicated, it's not ideological, it is economics 101. Before a young Australian buys their first home, they rent. So when Labor puts upward pressure on rents, it does not help young Australians. It hurts them before they even get to the starting line. A young person who's saving for a deposit's already being hit from every direction. They're paying more rent, they're paying more for groceries, they're paying more for electricity, they're paying more because inflation has run through the essentials of life. And now this government wants to reduce the number of rental homes that are available to them while they save. That's not fairness, that is betrayal. Now, Labor says that these changes will level the playing field, but what they're actually doing is pitting investors against first home buyers. They're telling investors, if you want to retain the benefit of negative gearing, go and buy new properties.
And the debate is interrupted now.
McPherson in continuation.
Labor are telling investors, if you want to retain the benefit of negative gearing, go and buy new properties. And at the same time, state governments across the country are encouraging first home buyers into those same new properties through stamp duty concessions and first home buyer grants. So investors and first home buyers are being pushed into the same segment of the market at the same time. They will compete against each other for the same limited supply, which means that prices will be bid up, builders will face more pressure, and young Australians will again be told to run faster on a treadmill that Labor has made steeper. Many of these state-based schemes are operated by Labor governments, so how can the Prime Minister not understand that his federal tax changes will collide directly with state-based concessions and grants? Either they do not understand the market they're regulating, or they understand it and are proceeding anyway. Neither explanation should give Australians any comfort. This government's creating a generation of permanent renters. And, Mr Deputy Speaker, Labor should have learned this lesson before, because in the 1980s, under Treasurer Paul Keating, Labor tried to quarantine negative gearing, and it was reversed. Why? Because the pressure on rental markets became impossible to ignore. History's already issued this warning. The Treasurer should have listened to it. But this Treasurer does not learn from history. He tries to rewrite it. And there's also a deep hypocrisy at the heart of this debate, because 20 out of the 22 members of the Prime Minister's own front bench and the Prime Minister have used negative gearing to secure their own futures. They operated lawfully under the rules of the time. They made choices that many Australians have made: to invest, to take on risk, and to try to build financial security. Now, we don't criticise them for that, but this legislation protects the right of the Prime Minister and his Cabinet to continually negatively gear their properties into their future. So Australians are entitled to ask this question: why is it good enough for Labor ministers to use these rules to continue to build their wealth for themselves, but apparently it's too generous for future generations? Why is it acceptable for those opposite to climb the ladder and then pull it up behind them? That is the real question here. The second major problem is capital gains tax. Schedule 1 makes sweeping changes to the CGT regime. It replaces the 50% CGT discount with cost-based indexation and introduces a 30% minimum tax on capital gains. For many Australians, including founders, small business owners and investors, the government's now reaching for a much larger share of the return from risk. At the top marginal rate, this means the taxman can claim nearly half of the gain. Nearly half. The government did not take the risk. The government did not work the weekends. They did not sign the lease, put the family home on the line, hire the first employee, go without holidays, miss birthdays or lie awake at night wondering whether the business would survive. But when it finally works, Labor's turning up with its hand out. That is what this bill says to the self-starters of Australia. You risk it, we'll take it. A well-known local brewery in my electorate wrote to me this week saying, and I quote, "I can't sit and watch this pass without putting something on the record, so I've put pen to paper." The sale of the business is not a windfall. It's a long, illiquid reinvestment program that finally crystallises its sale. Privately held capital-intensive businesses are, by definition, the ones with physical footprints in Australia. They occupy industrial land. They employ tradespeople, machine operators, drivers, warehouse staff and apprentices. They buy inputs from Australian agriculture, and they contribute to the productive capacity of regional and outer metropolitan economies. They create value differently from purely digital or services businesses. These businesses already face globally uncompetitive energy, labour, freight and compliance costs. Margins are thin, returns are slow and capital is patient but by necessity. Policy settings that further reduce the after-tax return on productive reinvestment risk discouraging the long-term capital commitment these businesses require. In practice, many successful capital-intensive businesses are likely to exceed the small business CGT concession thresholds early in their growth journey as physical infrastructure and equipment are accumulated. The 50% CGT discount has been, for this category, the only recognition mechanism actually available. Its removal would materially reduce the only recognition the tax system currently provides for the long-duration, illiquid, reinvestment-heavy nature of these businesses. But as always with this Treasurer, the devil is in the detail. The Treasurer wants the Parliament to pass the laws first and then trust him to sort out the details, including carve-outs later. That's not good enough, because Australians have learned the hard way that when Labor says, trust us, they should check their wallet. This is a government that's been consistent with only one thing, being elastic with the truth. It said one thing before the election, and it's doing the opposite after. The Treasurer can dress it up in whatever language he likes, but Australians can see what's happening here. Labor has spent too much, taxed too much and borrowed too much, and now it wants the people who work, save and invest to foot the bill. This is not the Australia my parents believed in when they taught me that if you want something, you work for it. If you drop something, you pick it up. And if you're blessed with opportunity, you make the most of it. That is the Australia I love, and that is the Australia that those on this side of the chamber love. An Australia where effort's rewarded. An Australia where government lifts people up, not locks them in. Deputy Speaker, I say this directly to the Prime Minister. I love this country, I love it for what it has given my family, and I love it for the promise it has carried for generations. I love it because here, more than almost anywhere else on earth, people have been able to make something of themselves through effort, through sacrifice, and through belief. But Deputy Speaker, that promise is not automatic. That promise must be protected. That promise must be renewed. And it must be defended against governments that think that prosperity is something to be managed, divided and taxed rather than created, earned and shared. Deputy Speaker, what has made Australia great is not envy. It's not resentment. And it's not the politics of dragging one person down and calling it fairness for another. What has made Australia great is a culture of reward for work and reward for effort. It's the belief that tomorrow can be better than today if we work for it. And it's the belief that a person should be able to start with little, build something, own something, and leave something better for their children. Our tax system should reflect that. This bill moves us in the opposite direction, and the Coalition will not support that, and we won't support that because the people that we represent, the individuals, the small businesses, the mums and dads, the investors, the families, the first home buyers and the renters, they expect better of us and they expect better of this government. Now, the Coalition supports tax relief, and we have said that consistently. We support simpler tax returns, and we support working Australians keeping more of what they earn. But we won't be bullied. We won't be bullied into supporting Labor's toxic taxes. Deputy Speaker, the day after the budget was delivered, the Coalition vowed to axe Labor's toxic taxes and vote them down. And that's exactly what we will do. And if these bills become law under this Labor government, a Coalition government will repeal Labor's toxic taxes. Because, Deputy Speaker, Australians deserve better than a government that breaks promises, that punishes aspiration and then calls it fairness. They deserve a government that backs them. And that is the clear message and consistent message that I receive from people across my electorate when I engage with them back home on the southern Gold Coast. Australians deserve a government that backs them. They deserve an Australia where the ladder of opportunity is not pulled up but strengthened for the next generation. And that is exactly what those on this side of the House will fight for. That is exactly what we will do. We will repeal these taxes for. And that is exactly what we on this side of the Parliament have committed to do. We oppose Labor's toxic taxes and we resent this government for putting them through and dressing them up as something that, quite frankly, they are not.